60 years ago, a show that would change musical theatre forever opened on Broadway.
Set in 1950s New York at a time of huge ethnic tension, West Side Story took a timeless tale to make a profound plea for tolerance and became a massive success on stage and screen.
And yet it nearly didn't get made. Turned down by every producer in town, the show was an uphill battle for the four brilliant and ambitious young men who created it.
But West Side Story touched a nerve, broke new boundaries and became a movie that was a global hit.
Now, for the first time, we'll hear the story of how it was created from the people who were actually there.
With young dancers in New York, we'll explore the brilliance of West Side Story's choreography.
And with our singers and orchestra, Bruno and I will discover the genius of this extraordinary score. This is the story of how a show that might never have happened became the best-loved musical of all time.
Are we all ready? Are we all ready for the day ahead?
Yes!
Go on.
It's sort of been a part of my life, West Side Story, for as long as I can remember. I'm just trying to think. I know as a kid, as a very small child, I don't know, 5 or 6, I knew Maria. I knew somewhat. I didn't know any of the words. It was all Maria, Maria. But I know I always knew it.
This is halfway, not the end, the halfway point. Okay.
For me, it was the movie. And from the first sequence, dance movement starts to build up. And you say, oh my God, this is what I want to do. This is the world I want to be part of. What I found extraordinary and compulsive is the way that dance was woven into the storyline, like dialogue. Just astonishing. Dance has always been central to the Broadway musical, but with its 5 iconic dance numbers, West Side Story took choreography in a radical new direction. The technique behind it, how even after 60 years is still some of the best choreography that you've ever seen, you possibly will ever see.
But West Side Story almost didn't happen. Bruno and I want to find out how this jewel of a show that nobody wanted finally came together to create a landmark in musical history. It all began in 1940s New York.
Just made for a girl and boy.
There's something about only really being in New York that you get why West Side Story had to happen here. It's so dense, it's so packed, everybody steep, literally, like one on top of the other. You know, everything's almost explosive. It's a kind of crazy place. There's people singing in the streets. It's a noisy kind of city. And you get that sense that, I mean, here we go, noisy city, thanks, hi. You can see why that would create such a tense, nervous musical.
And you get this sense that New York is a city full of possibilities for some people, but not for the people in this show.
Hey everyone, it's Seth Rudetsky. For the next hour or so, Seth speaks, and I've got a lot to say. Hey, live audience, and... All right, hey everyone, it's Seth Rudetsky. On this week's SiriusXM Seth Speaks, we're going to focus on West Side Story. We have a million amazing West Side Story people here.
The little kid in me is freaking out right here, just standing in the presence of all of you. I mean, I still feel to this day, it's just one of the greatest pieces of art that we've ever created in this country.
The idea behind West Side Story came from Jerome Robbins, a protégé of ballet superstar Georges Balanchine and already one of Broadway's biggest names. Robbins was fascinated by the method school of acting and by how to bring gritty reality into dance. One day, a friend asked him for advice about playing Shakespeare's Romeo, and a thought came into his mind.
And then suddenly the light just went on. I thought, my God, what a terrific contemporary play it would be.
But to have any chance of turning such a radical idea into reality, Robbins would need a dream team. Leonard Bernstein, an acclaimed symphonic composer and conductor, had already scored a ballet and a musical. Bernstein also had an instinct for what would work with a non-classical audience.
I remember that evening very well. I remember it like yesterday, the evening at Jerry's apartment, because of the excitement.
Arthur Lawrence was a Hollywood screenwriter with credits like Hitchcock's crime thriller Rope. He excelled in holding a mirror up to society, so Robbins' idea struck a chord.
He came to me and said, let's do a contemporary musical about Romeo and Juliet. Jerry's idea was this was to be a Catholic girl, Jewish boy on the Lower East Side, New York.
I want to know more about the divided world that Bernstein, Robbins and Lawrence were considering as a setting for their Romeo and Juliet. I have come to meet Vita, an Italian who grew up here in the late 1940s, when the area was notorious for its warring gangs. Hello, Vita.
Hello.
How are you, my darling?
Hi, Bruno. How are you doing?
Tell me, how was it at that time?
There were boundaries.
Oh, really?
The Italians were here. The Jewish community was down there. The Puerto Rican community was there. There was a lot of division, a lot of lines that you did not cross, period. And I met a young man from outside of the neighborhood, and we became boyfriend and girlfriend, and therein started the problem.
Because you, a nice Italian girl, fell in love with?
Puerto Rican. From the Fourth Ward.
I got to know more about that.
Yes, from
so
the Fourth.
you have like your family reacted against that,
Oh,
or
yes.
they were supportive? Or?
Not at all.
No.
No, it was terrible. My father, in a 4-room apartment, did not speak to me for 6 years.
The show and the film is based on those divisions.
Yes.
Did you ever manage to see it?
Yeah, we never got to see the play because we could not afford the tickets. We got to see the movie.
It must have touched you.
Touched me. I can tell you the movie theater. I can tell you which row we were sitting in, weeping, and it was our story.
You were Maria.
Well, I wish.
More about that.
Yes, from
So
the Fourth.
you.
But the team's new brainchild would never come to fruition. The project was soon plagued by its creators' overloaded work schedules and disagreements between them about how best to reinvent Romeo and Juliet. By mid-1949, East Side Story had been mothballed. But the divisions of 1940s Manhattan were nothing compared to the 1950s. There'd been a dramatic change in the racial makeup of the population.
I like to be in America, okay by me in America. Everything's free in America, for a small fee in America.
Puerto Ricans, who'd long had the right to live in the US, were arriving in ever-increasing numbers.
Won't you can get down?
By 1955, there were over 500,000 Puerto Ricans living in New York, facing discrimination as neighborhoods changed overnight. Rita Moreno, who'd later played the Shark's girl Anita in the movie West Side Story, came with her mother in search of a better life.
Oh, hi!
How are you?
How are you?
Oh.
Coming to America was an enormous shock because it was freezing cold. It was February. And it was not a happy welcome. People didn't like us very much. And my very earliest experiences were of young people calling me spick, which is a horrific word. And I couldn't understand why. What was I doing that made these young people so angry at me?
Immigrant goes to America, many hellos in America, nobody knows in America, Puerto Rico's in America.
And then some years passed.
Lenny and I were in Hollywood at the same time. We were sitting with our legs dangling in the pool, talking about the riots that had been the day before with Chicano gangs. And I thought, that could be Romeo and Juliet. And the fact it was Chicano, just Lenny adored because he loved Latin American beat. So he wanted to do it in Los Angeles. I said, I don't know anything about Los Angeles, but I knew New York. And we called Jerry. Well, he would have done it if we said China. He just wanted to do it. And that's how it began.
Two households, both alike in dignity, in fair Verona, where we lay our scene.
From ancient grudge, break to new mutiny, where civil blood makes civil hands unclean.
From forth the fatal loin of these two foes, a pair of star-crossed lovers take their life.
Whose misadventured piteous overthrows doth with their death bury their parents' strife.
The fearful passage of their death-marked love and the continuance of their parents' rage.
Which, but their children's ends, not could remove, is now the 2 hours traffic of our stage.
The which if you, with patient ears, attend, what here shall miss, our toil shall strive to mend.
The warring factions of Shakespeare's tragedy are rival families, the Montagues and the Capulets. This radical retelling would pit the Puerto Rican street gang, the Sharks, against a white gang, the Jets.
The Sharks are our enemies. They're the invader in our territory. What the Jets own is land, turf. And anybody who wants to come and, step on it, watch out.
When you're a jet all the way from your first cigarette to your last dying day. When you're a jet, if the spit hits the fan, you got brothers around, you're a family man. The jets are in gear, our cylinders are clicking, the Sharks will steer clear, 'cause every Puerto Rican's a lousy chicken. Here come the jets, yeah, and we're gonna beat every last bugging gang on the whole bugging street, on the whole ever mother loving street.
Yeah. West Side Story happens to be about intolerance. Is not in American life, but in life all over the world. The problem of intolerance and the price one has to pay for having it in one's culture is an enormous one and a tragic one.
West Side Story was unlike anything else on 1950s Broadway, a place of escapism with feel-good hits like My Fair Lady and Guys and Dolls.
There was a tremendous animosity to the whole idea, both musically and every other way.
Yes, I'm Susie.
I've come to meet Bernstein's daughter, Jamie, to find out how her father would translate the dark subject of violent street gangs into popular music.
For my father, the big falling into place was that the music had an immediate double definition. So the White Street Gang, the Jets, all their music was in this bebop jazz vocabulary. While the Puerto Rican Sharks Gang had all their music in, it fell right into this Latin American vocabulary, which of course is the richest musical vocabulary you could find. So my father was immediately galvanized.
There was a boy.
Originally, my father was going to write the music and the lyrics, and he just quickly became overwhelmed. It was just too much work. So they decided to bring in a lyricist, and Arthur Lawrence recommended this kid, Steve Sondheim, who was in his 20s. He was a kid. So they brought in the kid.
One day, a magic day he passed my way.
So I'm going to be meeting Stephen Sondheim.
Fools and kings, this day.
The great Stephen Sondheim. I mean, arguably like the greatest living proponent of musical theatre. He's an amazing composer. He's the lyricist on West Side Story. But also he's the only guy left of these four greats.
I didn't want to do it, but my sort of surrogate father and mentor was Oscar Hammerstein. I went to him for advice on this, and he said, I think you should do it. Though, of course, what you want to do is write music. Nevertheless, this is a chance to work with real professionals like Jerome Robbins and Leonard Bernstein and Arthur Lawrence. And I think you should do it. It'll be a very, very good experience for you. I said, okay, and that's how I got the job. Musically, I learned a lot from Lenny just by listening, seeing how he approached writing, you know, that's osmosis, you know. He never lectured me. He never said, now, you see when you do that. There was none of that. He was very fond of changing my lyrics. If I would write something and then he would change them and say, wouldn't this be better? And
really?
Then we'd would argue. I was 25 years old. You know, he treated me like a kid. He treated me very nice and very well, but it was always that condescension was there. It took a long time before he accepted the fact that I was my own man.
There are some sketches that exist of preliminary lyrics that my father wrote. Maria, it's a sound like there's music playing. It's a sound like in church when they're praying. And I thought, that's just so inelegant. That is really so inferior to Maria, say it loud and there's music playing. Say it soft and it's almost like praying. Now that's a lyric. But that was Steve.
I think he was very happy to have a collaborator who was a musician. I may be flattering myself, but there it is.
My father hated being alone. And composing is a very lonely business. And I think that's one of the reasons he liked working in musical theater so much. And it was less lonely. Sure, the moment came when, and it was usually at 4 a.m., when he would have to sit down and write those notes, but he knew that the next day he'd be back with his buddies, and that just made it all so much less onerous.
West Side Story was nearing completion. Veteran Broadway producer Cheryl Crawford had taken on the show, and casting began in earnest.
Hello, Bruno, benvenuto.
I am meeting Carol Lawrence, who auditioned for the part of Maria, West Side Story's Juliet.
You've got to see if this is the right, because I think it's done, Bruno.
Perfect.
Perfetto. Everybody in New York City knew that Jerome Robbins had this incredible concept that everybody said would never work, and told him, forget about it, it'll be an artistic flop, you can't have a tragedy. We were taking Shakespeare and morphing it into modern day violence and controversy and gangs and everything that people were against.
For the role of Tony, West Side Story's Romeo, the producers auditioned dozens of bright young hopefuls. Larry Kert had been turned down for 3 different roles until Stephen Sondheim spotted him one day in a commercial.
8 o'clock in the morning, I'm singing, "This shirt is 43% cotton, 22% wool." You know, one of those silly things you do. Stephen Sondheim happened to be there that morning, came backstage and said, "Boy, I've seen your auditions. How come you don't sing high for us? You've always sung this low stuff." I said, "Listen, every day I read in the paper you're looking for a 6-foot blonde Polish tenor for Tony. I'm a 5'11" Jewish baritone." He said, "I'm setting you up an audition for Tony."
As well as the leads, there were 19 gang members to cast.
Welcome. Grover, nice to meet you. I'm Bruno.
Grover Dale auditioned for the part of Snow Boy in the Jets.
That first audition, how did he assess if you were able to do that stuff during the initial audition period?
You know what we did? This is what we did.
Oh, je t'aime. That's
Okay.
like a ballet, like
Yeah,
a ballet
like
class.
ballet. But he could tell how much elevation we
You
had.
exactly.
He could see what our technique was, and he could see how present we were in the room. If we were willing to fill up the space, or if we're just in this body. We weren't.
So the eye was absolutely spot on.
Martin Charnin, how did you get involved with West Side Story?
Jerome Robbins was looking for the final 2 authentic juvenile delinquents. I rolled up my T-shirt, put a pack of Luckies here, made my hair look like a duck's ass to make sure that it looked like James Dean or somebody. Tightest jeans I had, which of course do not fit me anymore. Well, he said, "Snap your fingers," which I did.
Signature snapping.
I was the only one who didn't have to wet their fingers.
Now,
to
why is
snap.
that? You're naturally oily?
Because I could naturally snap my fingers.
Wait, that puts you a cut above the rest? And then what, you got a callback?
The hunt was still on for Tony and Maria. Their story of young love caught up in a pointless turf war was at the heart of the show, so it was essential they had the right chemistry. In the scene where the lovers are alone together for the first time, Juliet's iconic balcony becomes a New York fire escape, the setting for one of Bernstein's most memorable songs.
Tonight, tonight, it all began tonight. I saw you and the world went away. Tonight, tonight, there's only you tonight. What you are, what you do, what you say.
All day I had the feeling a miracle would happen. I know now I was right. For here you are, and what was just a word is a sword
The search for the stars was exhaustive. On her 13th audition, Carol Lawrence was paired with Larry Kert.
Jerry Robbins said, "I'm going to have him sing Maria, but I want you to hide somewhere on the stage. And if he finds you, do the balcony scene." There was nothing to hide behind. But on the wall of the theater was a little grating of iron. I didn't even know if it would hold me. But I climbed and knelt down in a fetal position. So he was singing Maria, looking and looking and looking, and nowhere was I to be found because I was behind his head. And so finally, he went to the pit and I yelled, I whispered, "Tony, Tony." and he turned and became Spider-Man. He climbed that wall, and we did the entire balcony scene, not knowing if this would even hold us.
When you dream, dream of me.
At the end of it, he leapt off, and he left. They stood up and applauded. Jerome Robbins applauded.
Leonard Bernstein comes down and he says, I don't know what's going to happen, but that's the most mesmerizing audition I've ever seen.
And they said, you've got it. And that's when I really burst into tears. I couldn't believe it.
For two of the biggest dance numbers in the show, Leonard Bernstein was indulging his love of Latin beats.
In the song America, the rhythms are a combination of Mexican huapango and Venezuelan joropo, which are rhythms in 3/4 time.
That doesn't sound then very Puerto Rican to me, which is what this gang is meant to be after all.
I think what Bernstein was trying to convey is the universality of Latin America and how these Puerto Ricans were adapting to this new life on the mainland.
Shall we? 5, 6, 7, 1, 2, 3, and 4, 5. 1, 2, and 4. And this spreads you out. Push through, and 1. This is a beautiful jet line there. This is a stake onto your territory. This is an image that worked for him, and you see it throughout the show. Jet language.
Julio Monge is a Puerto Rican choreographer and director who was mentored by Jerome Robbins. He's one of only a small number of people authorized to restage Robbins' work on West Side Story.
Guys, it's all about precision. Robbins is very precise. If you don't do that, it weakens the material. He was marvelous. He was very tough. A lot of people immediately ask me, was he as mean as they say? Yes, he was very rough, but I think it had to do with his focus, with how much he asked of himself and of everybody. When I worked with him, he would yell at us, "Stop dancing!" He was this, what are you thinking? What is your purpose? What is your intention? And you had to approach your dance from a different place. So everybody, we're gonna be looking at America. Ready? Let's give it a try with the music. Let's see what that looks like. Stay connected. Yeah. Nice.
In the mid-1950s, Latin music was one of the city's biggest crazes. Leonard Bernstein and his Chilean wife, Felicia, were regulars at the Palladium, where every Wednesday night, celebrities rubbed shoulders with people from the Bronx and Harlem to dance the mambo. Bernstein transported the mambo beat from New York clubs to the musical stage, incorporating it into one of West Side Story's biggest dance scenes. A party where the rival gangs have a dance-off and where Tony and Maria meet for the first time.
Key to this is what we call the clave, these two sticks. This rhythm is in everything. It's in hip hop. Get. It's in salsa. Oye que ritmo va bueno, oye que quiero gozar. Mambo. There's so many references in there, like Leonard Bernstein used to say, the best composers are magpies. They steal from everybody. Okay?
1 is nothing, 3, 4. And if you add that, Bobby, if you give me that basic mambo, 5, 6, 7, and 1. 3, 5, 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, 7, and 1. 1.
The one thing about Lenny's music, which was so tremendously important, was that there always was a kinetic motor, which had a need for it to be demonstrated by dance. And it always was a great, wonderful, exciting trip to choreograph to Lenny's music.
The thing about my father and his music is that he was always building bridges between genres. So when it came to West Side Story, he was bringing all his symphonic toolkit to the project. When a composer writes a symphony, there are these building blocks that a composer will take and use them all the way through the symphony, the way Beethoven begins his Fifth Symphony with ba-ba-ba-ba. But then he uses that ba-ba-ba-ba thing all the way through that first movement and beyond, and it keeps coming back, and it's like becomes the backbone of the symphony. And in West Side Story, that building block is something that you hear at the very beginning of the show. It's the first three notes. Ba-ba-bum. And those three notes are the key. They are the code for the whole West Side Story score. And those three notes form something that's called a tritone.
A little music lesson. Okay, so what I just realized this year, after listening to West Side Story my entire life, is how much of the show is focused on the tritone. So a tritone is, there's a fourth, here comes the bride, that is a fourth, or there's a fifth, twinkle, twinkle, little star, so there's a fourth and a fifth. Tritone is right between that. Also called the devil's interval, just saying. It's a sharp fourth. So much of the show has this tritone. For instance, there's cool, boy, boy, crazy boy. There's also the reverse. So instead of, there's this. Could be, it's a tritone. There's also Maria itself. Maria, it's a tritone. And then I just literally today realized, dear, kindly Sergeant Krupke, the entire show is all tritones.
The tritone is ambiguous, and that makes it a little dangerous, and you don't know what to expect. It could lead you down a scary path. So that's pretty ingenious.
Broadway had never seen anything like West Side Story. With a dark score, a cast of unknowns, fight scenes, and 3 murders on stage, it seemed a risky proposition. Just 6 weeks before rehearsals were due to start, the producer, Cheryl Crawford, pulled out.
It was very difficult for her because the boys, as she called them, she had a hard time dealing with them. And I think down deep she thought it would be a good show, but that would never be a hit. And she just put everything in a box, all the papers, just put it in my lap and said, here.
We stood up and we left. We went out and down the street from her office was the Algonquin Hotel. And we thought, well, we better have a drink.
Arthur and I went to drown our sorrows and figure out what to do.
And we walked in, and they wouldn't let me in. I didn't have a tie on.
We thought, talk about insult to injury. Gee whiz, our entire lives have just fallen apart, and we're terribly sorry you can't have a drink because you don't have a tie.
Sondheim got in touch with his old pal, Hal Prince, a talented young producer who would go on to stage some of the most successful musicals of the 20th century. Prince saw an opportunity and flew into New York to meet the team.
This was not something everybody wanted to produce. When your producer drops, you think, oh Lord, it's never gonna happen. Steve had played the whole score in my apartment, in his apartment. I knew it very well, and I loved it. And he said, but please don't tell anyone you've heard any of the material, because Lenny's very finicky about it. He doesn't want anyone to have heard any of it. I said, okay. So I said, we'll meet at Lenny's apartment. Lenny started playing very loudly, so the nerves are really there. Very loud. And Lenny can play loud anyway. And somewhere during the playing of the score, I suddenly started to hum one of the songs. Inadvertently, I didn't even realize I was doing it. And I thought, oh God, what have I just done? And Lenny stopped and said, that's what I've always wanted, is a musical producer. By the time I left his apartment, we had agreed to do it.
With Hal Prince on board, rehearsals started on the 24th of June, 1957. Larry Kurt's first solo was a song that's sometimes described as the expression of an inarticulate, excited young man.
Riff, I've had it.
At this point in the story, Tony hasn't yet met Maria, but he's disillusioned with gang warfare and is longing for a better future.
Come on, look at me.
Jerry Robbins came to me one day and he said, you know, the Tony character is not being established well enough. Go up to the Osborne Hotel. Steve and Lenny have just written you a song. And they played me Something's Coming. The vamp is da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da.
Could be, who knows? There's something due any day. I will know right away, soon as it shows.
I think about it now because I just well up. I mean, 3 weeks ago, I was singing This Shirt is 33%. Now Leonard Bernstein and Stephen Sondheim are writing me a song.
Something's coming, don't know when, but it's soon. Catch the moon, one-handed catch. Around the corner, for whistling down the river. Come on, deliver to me. Will it be? Yes, it will. Maybe just by holding still, it'll be there. Come on, something, come on in. Don't be shy, read a guy, pull up a chair. The air is humming, and something great is coming. Who knows? It's only just out of reach, down the block on a beach, maybe tonight.
This is a rehearsal.
At what point of the rehearsals were this? You remember?
This was early.
Earlier on.
Yeah.
They all loved each other.
Right.
It was still the honeymoon
Yes,
period.
yes. We sensed that there was something special going on in that room.
Larry Kurt was an angel. He was one of the sweetest human beings I will ever know in my life. And Jerry Robbins said, I want to know, without a doubt, that you are both deeply in love with each other. Otherwise, I have 3 people standing in the wings for each of you to replace you. And I turned to Larry and I said, we fell in love that moment, and I've loved him ever since. He's no longer with me in physical sense, but he's always in my heart. He was my first real, loving, romantic leading man on Broadway.
Here they are watching the rehearsal.
They all look a bit apprehensive, don't they? Well, they're not laughing there.
No, they're not.
Is it getting a bit darker now? You can see the expressions.
The smiles
yeah,
have
the
drifted
smiles
off.
are frozen, and there is kind of a look. Look. You can tell, because we've all been in this situation, haven't we?
Yes.
Look at the faces.
Yeah.
What is Jerry?
Jerry's right here.
I want to know what it was like to be at rehearsals with Jerome Robbins. Chita Rivera, who created the role of Anita, was one of the cast who got put through her paces.
Oh my God, Broadway royalty!
Where?
It's you! It's you, a legend! Thank you so much!
Oh, thank
How
you.
are you?
I'm fine,
Oh,
thank you.
mwah.
I'm good, as a matter of fact.
Jerry's cruelty towards members of the cast. Have you ever been the recipient of that?
Never. I called him Big Daddy. I saw a little bit of it. Hey, listen, you know, as a dancer, it's not easy to do what we do.
Oh, no,
And if we
it's-
didn't have that teacher, that one teacher, to really scare the heck out of us,
Yeah,
where
no.
would we be? We
No,
wouldn't have tried it.
No, because it's that moment, okay, I'm just gonna get through this and and there is the point as well, so I'm gonna show you.
Absolutely.
I am gonna show you whatever it takes.
Absolutely.
I'm gonna do
Yeah.
work at home overnight. Next morning, I'm gonna
All
come.
of that makes you who you are.
And it makes you who you are.
Jerry Robbins was such a perfectionist, and everybody adored and dreaded and feared him. But that's the way choreographers were. You know that the choreographer's relationship with a dancer is one of intimidation, humiliation, degradation, and to incite them into rebelling.
Jerry had invested us with this whole idea of it's real. So if you're going to hit somebody, hit them. If you're going to knock them with an elbow, knock them with your elbow.
I turned down stage and I was supposed to turn up stage, and there is the portal right there. So bam, right into the portal. My tooth came out through my lip, and the blood is everywhere. By this time, Christoph Cavallero picks up my tooth that was on the stage, comes off, gives it to Beverly, and someone after the show said, "Is it always this realistic?" The rumble, it was just fantastic.
No one was ever not injured in that show.
I also had a rib broke by Nick, who was Bernardo.
I broke my foot.
Yeah, you know,
What's
pushing.
happening?
My nose.
You broke your nose?
I have a broken nose.
Okay, we'll be back with more horrific West Side Story tales. Set Speaks.
I'm sitting in the darkened theater with Lenny, and they start playing it, and Jerry goes down the aisle, and he stops, and Jerry says, I want circle the clarinet, circle the flute. Circle means take out and reduce the orchestra. And I thought, I can't believe it. He's changing Lenny's orchestration. Of course, Jerry had no right to do that. If the composer wants this and the choreographer wants that, the composer wins. I thought, oh my God. And I turned to see what Lenny's reaction was, and he wasn't there. It was an empty seat. And I had an instinct. I thought, where's the nearest bar? And sure enough, he was there. He had 4 shots of scotch lined up in front of him. Lenny just hated confrontation, and Jerry knew that. One of Jerry's parts of his genius was he could size you up immediately when he met you and know what you were most afraid of. The only way to win the argument was to be humiliating to Lenny in public. Lenny would not go down and say, what the f are you doing?
Darling, the work grinds on relentlessly, and sleep is a rare blessing. It's going to be murder from here on. The show. Ah, yes. I am depressed. All the aspects of the score I like best get criticized as operatic. And there's a concerted move to chuck. What's the use? I am tired and nervous. This is the last show I do.
In public, in front of us, it was all peaches and cream. And occasionally, something creative, a difference would erupt. Occasionally. But they were smart enough to know you don't fight in front of your company of actors, because that's only going to say to them, the commander doesn't know what he's doing.
But finally, against all the odds,
After countless auditions, a change of producer, and the pressures of money and time, the musical that nobody had believed in,
but which its creators had fought so hard to get staged, was at last ready to go.
We open Monday.
The Jets are gonna have their day tonight.
I tell you, this show may yet be worth all the agony.
Okay, no rumpus, no tricks, but just in case they jump us, we're ready to.
As you can see, I'm excited as hell.
We're gonna rock it tonight. We're gonna jazz it up and have us some more. They're gonna get it tonight. The more they turn it on, the harder they fall. They began it, but they began it, and we're the ones to stop them once and for all.
On September the 26th, 1957, West Side Story finally opened to a star-studded audience at the Winter Garden Theatre on Broadway.
He's walking hot and tired, so what? Don't matter if he's tired, as long as he's hot.
Tonight won't be just any night.
And there was Marlene Dietrich and Tyrone Power and Cary Grant. But we could see in the first 8 rows, it was devastatingly exhausting on the stage and nerve-wracking and frightening.
Stars will stop where they are. Today, the minutes seem like hours. The hours go so slowly, and still the sky is light.
We all ran to the footlights for the bow, and the curtain went up, Bruno, and there was not a sound. And I thought, it's a flop. They were right. And then, as if Jerry Robbins choreographed it, they leapt to their feet.
Tear up the town, so I can count on you.
They began screaming, they began applauding, they began stamping their feet.
All right, 1 to 2.
And I had never heard anything like that before, and I began to cry.
We're gonna rock it tonight.
And 17 curtain calls later, Leonard Bernstein walked from the wings into my arms, and we just sobbed. We just sobbed because the audience took it to their hearts, and they said, yes, we believe you and we love you.
Despite critical and financial success, West Side Story initially ran for only 732 performances on Broadway. In today's terms, that's not really a hit. But West Side Story's biggest success was yet to come.
In the spring of 1960, production began on West Side Story, the movie. The show was adapted for the screen, with Jerome Robbins co-directing alongside veteran director Robert Wise. The first part of the movie was shot on the very streets where the story was set, the Upper West Side of Manhattan. Harvey Evans, one of the Jets, remembers dancing on the street.
Harvey. Susie, how are you? Pleasure to meet you. How are you?
Well, most of this was torn down already, but the streets where we filmed the actual prologue, they had moved everyone out of, so no one lived in these buildings, but they were still up. So Jerry Robbins asked the city if they could rent those streets. He gave us a ballet bar in the street with people watching, and we'd all be doing our pliés and all that in our costume. This is called the sailing step, and it means owning the street. You own the street.
Harvey, you still own the street.
Oh, thank you.
The show was recast, with Natalie Wood starring as Maria and Rita Moreno taking on the role of Anita.
So good there, we had nothing.
I knew Anita. I knew it the minute I saw the script and the audition. I knew who this girl was. She was me.
Puerto Rico.
The first time I ever played a Hispanic girl who had a sense of self, who had a sense of dignity. There was nobody like me.
The following year, Rita Moreno became the first Puerto Rican female ever to win an Academy Award.
A moment that will be remembered for its spontaneity comes with Rock Hudson's announcement of Rita Moreno as Best Supporting Actress. The Puerto Rican-born singer-dancer is simply overwhelmed by it all.
Good Lord, I'll leave you with that.
Fred Astaire presents the headline Oscar, Best Picture, accepted by producer Robert Wise for West Side Story, which garners a total of 10 Academy Awards, second to Ben-Hur on the all-time list of Oscar winners.
Maria!
The enormous success of West Side Story meant that its creator's message of tolerance had a global impact. It still chimes with many former gang members who saw their own lives reflected on screen.
The message to me was always love conquers all.
You know, there's a Romeo and Juliet aspect to the story, but there's also a Christ aspect to the story at the end when he's being carried out, and his death creates this reconciliation. But in the neighborhood itself, I don't think that could happen. I don't think people were mature enough.
That sense of belonging, of being, you know, blood brothers in a gang, did that feel true for you?
Oh, absolutely.
It still does. It is. We still meet. We walk the neighborhood, we smile, we cry, and we just reminisce. I wish that it would not start over again.
In an age of anxiety, West Side Story is as resonant today as it was in the 1950s.
It's just a really moving story that just keeps retelling and retelling itself, of people all over the world who aren't able to love who they want to, aren't able to express themselves, aren't able to be themselves.
There's a place for us
Somewhere is about there never being a place where you can really settle down.
peace and quiet and open air. Wait for us somewhere.
Is about longing and wanting that kind of state of, let's call of state of bliss that is not attainable to you.
There's a place for us somewhere. It's never quite revealed. You know it's never really going to happen. It's full of wishes and hopes that are never really going to come true. And Bernstein puts that instability right into the music.
We are polarized more than ever, and that's what the show and the movie brings into focus. The result of that is violence and pain, while we should do the opposite, you know. But unfortunately, people should watch West Side Story more often. It's just very, very simple, universal. And the music is just a perfect work of art.
My hand and I'll take you there somehow, someday, somewhere.
It means that there is hope, that it is within all of us to find that utopia. And if we can't find it, then to make it.
Was my father a realist or an optimist? I think he wanted to be an optimist, but he was worried about the state of the world. And you can hear this precisely in the finale. Somewhere, somewhere. So that's how West Side Story ends. Is the world getting better? Is there hope for us to find a better place to all live together in harmony? Not sure.
I love that. All right, you guys are all amazing. Bravo, West Side Story. Bravo, everybody. Oh, my God.
All the beautiful sounds of the world in a single word. Maria, 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 Maria. I just met a girl named Maria, and suddenly that name will never be the same to me. Maria, I just kissed a girl named Maria, and suddenly I found how wonderful a sound can be. Maria, say it loud and there's music playing. Say it soft and it's almost like praying. Maria, I'll never stop saying Maria. Like praying.
And you can hear the BBC prom of West Side Story on iPlayer Radio now. Next year, with performances and interviews, what better than Leonard Bernstein at the BBC?
Maria.